Hello people, I'm John Manimus, and today I'm going to talk to you about the economy. As you can see, I'm not wearing a shirt, and that's because I'm going to give you the naked truth about economics and the economy. You may have heard people say that economics is an imprecise science. Well, actually that's not true. It is quite precise, and I'll tell you exactly how precise it is, because I'm going to repeat the little ditty with which I ended my last video. When we make rules, sometimes we write them out, and it takes space to write them out. Like, for example, the Ten Commandments, they fit on 1 or 2 pages. The Sermon on the Mount from Jesus, that fits on 1 or 2 pages. There's also another important passage in the New Testament, which I call the standard of evaluation. That's Matthew 25. That fits on a couple of pages. The Bill of Rights, that fits on 1 or 2 pages, maybe 3 pages, depending on the size of the print. And our entire Constitution, federal Constitution, fits on 35 to 40 pages. So these are rules for living, for life, for government, is the most important basic principles that we use as guidance to live by. So actually, the most important principles can fit into a few words, relatively speaking, because there's another set of rules for who gets the money. Where does the money go? How does our society channel money from one person to another? Because that's actually the way money travels, from one person to another. I mean, we use wires and banks and paper, but every transaction is money is going from one person's hands into another person's hands. And that set of rules is written in a booklet called the IRS Code, the Internal Revenue Code. And that book of rules, which describes how the money is channeled and where the money goes, who gets the money, that set of rules fits on 5,300 pages. So that's very interesting, isn't it? Why do we need 5,300 pages to describe who gets the money? Well, the answer is really quite simple. It's because the truth about economics is that there are people who control the government, who control the laws. And if you have a nobility, such as the American nobility, and a selfish political class, what they do is they make the laws to channel the money from the people to them. It's really that simple. But in order to do that, they have to write a lot of really crazy laws, really very precise. You know, people call it legalese. You ever tried to read the Internal Revenue Code? Sounds like it was written by lunatics, committed. It's up and down and left and right. It's a tangle. It's a plate of spaghetti. It's a giant bowl of spaghetti. And all those spaghetti rules are crazy rationalizations to channel the money to the people who control the government, so that they can have the money and continue to control everything that they want to control with money. At least that's the way they want it to work. And it works that way most of the time. An awful lot of our behavior is controlled by money, isn't it? I think we have to admit that. So, you see, the principle here that I hope will catch on and get a little hook in your brain so that you'll think about it and learn more about it and keep it in mind all the time. The economy is not mysterious or miraculous or natural. It's not the hand of God or an invisible hand, which I believe was Adam Smith. And there's a wonderful book called The Worldly Philosophers, which I think is readable by almost anybody who graduated from high school, which would give you an idea of about how people have struggled with this question of how does the economy work. Well, it isn't really automatic. Maybe when we're in a primitive society, long before we're even writing down our history, the economy is kind of natural, but it really comes about and is created by our desires and our labor and human beings pursuing their own needs. But as our society gets complicated and we get government, government becomes the vehicle to direct the economy, to design and direct the economy. Now, our economy in the United States of America is controlled by people who are called investors, and sometimes they're called bankers, commercial bankers. And the investors, of course, are on Wall Street. Wall Street is the largest gambling casino in the world. If you want to gamble, Venice, Monte Carlo, Vegas, that's for amateurs. The real serious gamblers go to Wall Street because there they gamble with billions and billions of dollars. And they have a special privilege on Wall Street that most people, with rare exceptions, or unless it's by special arrangement, when you go to one of the smaller casinos like Vegas or Monte Carlo or, you know, Mohegan Sun or wherever, you have to gamble with your own money. But on Wall Street, they get to gamble with other people's money. And they're always telling the poor people who give them their money, you can't lose, you're going to win. We'll make sure you win. We'll make sure you benefit. We'll make sure you may have some losses, but we'll make sure that your gains will exceed your losses. And then they start playing their own games, their little games where they try to fix the system. Insider trading is one, but that's just one of the most well-known. You know, that wonderful candidate, Elizabeth Warren. She's not the only one, but she's one of the people who got high up into the U.S. Senate who understands how the gamblers work on Wall Street. She could really help you to make those gamblers play a game that benefits everybody instead of just themselves. Anyway, that's where the gambling occurs, and of course from time to time they play their little games where they try to fix the system and make money out of nothing. That's what happened in 1929, that's what happened in 2007, and it happens on a small scale over and over again, many times every few years. They play some kind of gambling game on Wall Street where they're going to make money out of nothing. And it's always the wrong thing to do. Because the right thing to do, the real thing, if the economy is going to be real and if it's going to work the way it really was intended to work, there's no such thing as money based on nothing. Every monetary value is supposed to be based on some public good or product or service, something that people wanted that was actually produced. Money doesn't have to be backed by gold, but it has to be backed by something. The gamblers on Wall Street continuously invent games for their own pleasure, games for the rich, which are essentially gambling with everybody's money. And then the little guys lose. That's why if you've lost your home, that's why you lost your home, because of the gamblers on Wall Street. If you lost your job, that's why you lost your job, because of the gamblers on Wall Street. So that's how the Internal Revenue Code describes where the money goes, but it's not just the Internal Revenue Code. It's our laws on the books passed by our federal government and state governments that establish who gets the money and who gets the goods. And what are the goods? The goods are the product of our economy, the gross national product, or the gross, they've named it something else sometimes, the gross national product or the gross domestic product. It's all the goods and services that people have provided to the community, to others, and a monetary value is added to each one. and then it's distributed. People get the lettuce and the steak, and they get their house painted, and they get their car fixed, and they see the doctor, and they buy a car, and they buy a computer, and they buy a toy. They're sharing in the wealth of the community. This is how we share in the wealth of the community. We go shopping. We buy the stuff that our national community has produced. And how do you buy it? You buy it with money. What happens if you have no money? If you have no money, you have no nothing. If you have no money, you can't buy anything, which means the nothing that you can afford to buy is what you have. You have nothing because you have no money. That's the way our economy works. So everybody gets some money, and we play little games, and we get angry at one another, and we criticize the rich, and we criticize the poor, and we criticize the middle class. We're always trying to blame somebody for the flaws in our system for distributing national wealth. Well, you see, if you open your eyes and you open your brain, you will see that the way that we distribute the national wealth isn't just with trucks and trains and stores and shelves and carts. No. Ultimately, the very last transaction, the last step in distributing the wealth of our nation is you, the consumer, buys the product or service, and you buy it with money. So think about it. That last act of distribution is your purchase, which you made with your money. You know what that actually means? It means that the vehicle we use to distribute the wealth of our national community is not the train, not the car, not the boat, not the airplane, not the road, not the bridge, not the store, not the shelf, not the checkout. The wealth is distributed by distributing the money. That's how you get your share of the national wealth, with your money. And if you have no money, that means you've been cut out. You've been excluded. You're not in it. What the capitalists and the investors and the people, the political class that control our economy are saying to you is, go hide under a rock and die. You're not included in the national economy anymore because you have no money. What has been distributed to you as your share of the national wealth is zero. That's what you get. If you have no money, you get no wealth. You get nothing. So I hope you'll just think about that. That if we want to share like we're taught when we're children, if we want everybody to be included in the economy, let's call it the people's economy, let's call it our economy. If we don't want to tell people that they just can drop dead because they have no money, that means we have to disperse some money to everyone. Please think about that. In the next video about the economy, I'm going to talk about who creates jobs, and also why the capitalists and the investors and the bankers hate Karl Marx, because he said something that really hurt their feelings. And I'll tell you that in the next video. Thanks for listening. See you next time.